The worst decisions in life rarely feel dangerous when you are making them. The announcement echoed through Terminal B for what felt like the 10th time that night. Every seat near the departure gate was occupied. Families slept across rows of chairs. Business travelers stared at glowing laptop screens. Frustrated voices blended with the constant hum of rolling suitcases and delayed departure notices. I sat near gate 27, gripping my phone tighter than necessary as the airline app refreshed once again. Cancelled. The word remained unchanged. My flight to Chicago was gone. Just like that. A thunderstorm stretching across 3 states had grounded half the airport. The next available flight was not until the following afternoon. Nearly 18 hours away. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed brighter now. Colder. More exhausting. I had already spent 9 hours inside the airport after finishing a 3-day marketing conference in New York. All I wanted was my apartment, my bed, and the comfort of knowing tomorrow would be normal. Instead, I was stranded. Alone. The airport hotel was fully booked. Every nearby room had disappeared within minutes of the cancellation announcements. Rideshare prices had tripled. The few available rentals cost more than my entire conference reimbursement. I checked my bank account, then checked it again. The numbers had not magically improved. Outside the terminal windows, rain hammered the glass in endless sheets. Runway lights blurred beneath the storm. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the horizon, illuminating grounded aircraft like abandoned giants. Around me, travelers argued with airline representatives. Others sat quietly, accepting their fate. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself and stared through the rain. That was when I noticed him. At first, he did not seem unusual. Just another traveler standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark suit. One hand resting casually inside his coat pocket. The kind of man people instinctively gave space without realizing why. He looked completely unaffected by the chaos around him. While everyone else appeared stressed or exhausted, he stood perfectly still. Calm. Patient. Watching the storm as though he had all the time in the world. I looked away, then found myself looking back again. Something about him felt different. Not threatening. Not intimidating exactly. Just impossible to ignore. A few minutes later, my phone battery dropped to 5%. Perfect. I searched for an available charging station. Every outlet was occupied. Every seat was taken. I sighed and started walking toward another section of the terminal, dragging my carry-on behind me. The crowd had grown thicker. Delayed passengers flooded every corridor. Near the food court, someone accidentally bumped my shoulder. My boarding pass slipped from my hand and disappeared beneath a sea of moving feet. Great, I muttered. I crouched down trying to locate it. Before I could reach it, a polished black dress shoe stepped carefully beside the paper. A hand picked it up first. I looked up. It was him. The man from the window. Close, he looked even more striking. Dark hair. Sharp jawline. Calm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. Rain reflected across the glass behind him, creating streaks of silver light across his face. He glanced at the boarding pass before handing it back. Rachel Bennett, he said. His voice was low and controlled. Looks like we are both having a difficult night. I accepted the pass carefully. You could say that. A faint smile appeared. Not arrogant. Not charming. Just genuine enough to catch me off guard. Then another airport announcement filled the terminal. More cancellations. More frustrated groans. The stranger glanced toward the departure boards before looking back at me. Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? He asked. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to be cautious. Every news story I had ever heard told me not to trust strangers. Yet standing there beneath the cold airport lights, with the storm growing worse outside and nowhere to go, I had no idea that this simple question was about to change the direction of my entire life. The stranger held the door open, and I hesitated a moment, weighing my options, every logical part of my brain screaming not to trust him. Yet my exhaustion and desperation made my hesitation brief. The taxi lane outside glistened from the relentless rain. Cars splashing through puddles, people rushing to escape the storm. Luca Romano, the man in the sharp black suit, gestured toward his sleek black SUV parked just a few steps away, the rain reflecting on its polished surface like liquid obsidian. I stepped closer cautiously, carrying my small carry-on and a backpack that had been overstuffed for my conference trip. The interior of the SUV was immaculate, leather seats gleaming under the soft interior lights, the smell of leather and subtle cologne mingling in the space, creating an oddly calming atmosphere. Luca held the door for me with the same calm, observant expression, his brown eyes scanning the surroundings before settling briefly on mine, silently asking for trust. I slid in, the door clicking softly behind me, and a quiet stillness fell over the vehicle as we began to move, the windshield wipers sweeping rhythmically, slicing through the storm. I kept my hands folded in my lap, watching the blurred city lights streak past, feeling both exposed and strangely safe, the kind of safety that was more instinct than logic. Luca did not speak immediately. He drove with precise control, hands on the wheel, posture relaxed yet alert, his focus clearly on the road and the storm outside. Occasionally, his gaze flicked toward me, noting the tension in my shoulders, the tightness in my jaw. I wondered why he had chosen to approach me, why he had offered help when anyone else might have ignored a stranded traveler. The silence became a bridge between us, a delicate exchange of understanding without words. I dared a glance at him. He caught my eyes in the rearview mirror, giving a faint, knowing nod, as though he understood the inner turmoil of someone trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Traffic lights blurred, rain streaked the glass, and the city seemed to move in slow motion. My thoughts raced, questions forming but unspoken, about who he really was, why he had appeared at that exact moment, and what the consequences of this simple decision might be. A soft rumble from the tires on wet asphalt accompanied my rapid heartbeat, and I realized that this brief ride, these few minutes in a moving vehicle, were quietly shifting the story of my night, of my perception of strangers and trust. Luca finally spoke, voice calm, steady, without inflection of superiority or threat. "It is going to be all right," he said, and the words carried weight, not just for comfort but for control, a subtle command that eased my immediate anxiety. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my seat, and allowed myself to relax fractionally, knowing nothing about him, yet sensing that this stranger, this unexpected helper, was not just ordinary, that something important had shifted from the moment he appeared at the airport door. The rain continued its relentless rhythm against the windshield, streaks blurring the city lights into elongated streams of color, reflecting off wet asphalt like molten glass. Inside the SUV, the quiet was comfortable but charged, a tension that was not threatening, only alert and deliberate. Rachel Bennett watched the patterns of light pass over Luca Romano's face, noting the calm, calculated expression, the way his hands rested lightly yet firmly on the steering wheel. He seemed attuned to everything, the motion of the traffic, the subtleties of her posture, the barely perceptible shift in her breathing. I adjusted in the seat, feeling the leather under my fingers, the vehicle a cocoon of relative safety compared to the storm outside. Yet the question swirling in my mind refused to quiet. Who was he really? Why did he appear at this exact moment? A stranger offering an unexpected solution to my predicament. There was nothing in his words or tone to suggest threat. Every inflection conveyed patience, control, and quiet authority. My gaze drifted to the rain-soaked streets. Neon signs reflected across puddles, passengers rushing past on sidewalks with umbrellas tilting under the wind, while we moved through this blur in a contained bubble of calm. I dared a glance at Luca. His eyes, a deep, steady brown, caught mine in the rearview mirror, holding it just long enough to communicate that he understood, that he recognized. The unease, the vulnerability I could not mask, and that there was an unspoken contract of trust being formed. The hum of the tires against wet concrete was hypnotic, a steady cadence that mirrored my own heartbeat, slowing slightly with each passing block. He broke the silence lightly. "The storm makes everyone impatient." His voice low and even, carrying authority without arrogance. I nodded, unable to speak immediately, feeling the strange mix of anxiety and relief, the odd reassurance that came from sitting beside someone who exuded competence and calm in equal measure. The city blurred past, yet the SUV's interior felt intimate, a small world with its own rhythm, the storm outside unable to penetrate fully. I noticed the subtle details, the gleam of his watch, the careful precision in his movements, the deliberate calm that radiated from him. Every instinct told me to remain cautious, Yet every sense indicated that he was a protector in this strange circumstance, a steady presence in a night gone awry. With each stoplight and turn, the narrative of the evening shifted imperceptibly, the ordinary becoming tinged with significance. We drove past familiar landmarks, yet they seemed foreign in the rain, the night stretching endlessly, emphasizing the quiet gravity of our interaction. I could feel a subtle change in my own composure, the tension in my shoulders easing fractionally, realizing that this brief, unexpected encounter was shaping my night, and perhaps the story of my life, in ways I could not yet fully understand. Luca glanced again, a faint, imperceptible nod, a silent promise of reliability, a subtle acknowledgement that we were moving forward together through this unforeseen chaos, the storm outside a mere backdrop to the unfolding, unspoken drama within the SUV. The storm seemed endless. Rain hammered the roof of the SUV with a steady rhythm that blurred time itself, turning every mile into a quiet reflection of the strange circumstances that had brought us together. The city gradually faded behind us, skyscrapers dissolving into scattered lights and dark silhouettes beyond the rain-covered windows. I checked my phone out of habit. 2%. Battery.
No hotel reservación.
No flight. No plan. The reality of my situation settled heavily on my shoulders. Luca noticed immediately. He seemed to notice everything. "You have family waiting in Chicago?" he asked. His voice remained calm, measured, never forcing conversation.
No, irraplia.
Just my apartment. And a pile of work I was supposed to finish tomorrow. A faint smile appeared on his face. Work always survives one more day. I laughed softly. The sound surprised even me. It was the first genuine laugh I had managed since the cancellation announcement hours earlier. Outside, a flash of lightning illuminated the road ahead. For a brief moment, the interior of the vehicle glowed silver. The light revealed subtle details I had not noticed before. The precision of his suit, the expensive watch on his wrist, the confidence in every movement. Nothing about him felt ordinary. Yet he carried his presence so naturally that it never felt like an attempt to impress anyone. "What about you?" I asked. "Were you flying home too?" His eyes remained on the road. "Business trip. Successful." Another small smile. "That depends who you ask." The answer felt intentionally incomplete. Not rude, just careful, like someone accustomed to revealing only what was necessary. We drove in comfortable silence for several minutes. Then the navigation screen illuminated with a new route. I glanced at it instinctively. Instead of heading toward downtown hotels, the vehicle appeared to be moving toward a quieter section of the city. My pulse quickened slightly.
Luca noticed.
Again. "You are wondering where we are going." It was not a question. "A little." He nodded. "Fair." His honesty immediately eased some of my concern. "There is a private hotel outside the airport district. They keep several suites reserved year-round. I know the owner." The statement should have sounded ordinary. Somehow it did not. Something about the way he said it suggested relationships built on influence rather than convenience. I stared out the window again. My reflection looked different now. Less anxious. More curious. The stranger sitting beside me remained a mystery, yet every minute seemed to challenge my original assumptions. He was not trying to impress me. He was not asking for anything. He was simply helping. The realization felt increasingly rare in a world where favors usually came with expectations. A few moments later, his phone vibrated through the vehicle's speaker system. The screen lit briefly. A name appeared. Marco. Luca pressed a button on the steering wheel. "Everything is ready," a male voice said immediately. "Good," Luca replied. "I will arrive shortly." "Understood, boss." The line disconnected. "Boss." The single word lingered in the silence that followed. Luca's expression never changed. Neither did his posture. Yet something inside me shifted instantly. Not fear. Not exactly. Curiosity. The kind that arrives when you suddenly realize there is far more to a person than you originally believed. Rain continued falling outside. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. And for the first time that night, I began to suspect that the stranger driving through the storm was hiding a life far more complicated than he had allowed me to see. The word lingered in my mind long after the call ended. Boss. It was such a simple title, Yet the way the man on the phone had said it carried a level of respect that felt unusual. Luca did not seem eager to explain it, and surprisingly, I did not feel eager to ask. Not yet. Outside, the storm continued to blanket the highway, turning the world beyond the windows into a blur of silver and black. The SUV eventually left the interstate and entered a quieter area lined with tall trees and elegant buildings. The city noise faded behind us. Everything seemed calmer here. More private. More deliberate. A few minutes later, we turned through a set of wrought iron gates and entered a property that looked less like a hotel and more like an estate. Warm lights glowed from large windows. The architecture was timeless, elegant without being excessive. A covered entrance shielded guests from the rain, and several luxury vehicles sat parked beneath the lights. I stared through the windshield. This is a hotel? Luca glanced toward me. Technically. The answer made me smile despite myself. He pulled beneath the entrance canopy, and before I could even reach for the door handle, an attendant appeared carrying an umbrella. The efficiency caught my attention immediately. People here seemed to anticipate needs before they were spoken. Luca stepped out first. Rain danced across the umbrella above him while he walked around the vehicle and opened my door. The gesture felt old-fashioned. Unexpected. "Thank you," I said. "You are welcome, Rachel." The way he said my name remained strangely disarming. Inside, the lobby was quiet and beautiful. Soft golden lighting reflected against polished wood floors. A stone fireplace crackled in the distance. The scent of cedar and coffee lingered in the air. It felt less like a business and more like a sanctuary hidden from the storm. The woman behind the reception desk immediately stood when she saw Luca. Her expression brightened with recognition. "Good evening, Mr. Romano." Mr. Romano. The name settled into my thoughts.
Luca Romano.
Somehow hearing it spoken aloud made him feel even more mysterious. The receptionist glanced toward me with a warm smile. "The suite is ready."
Suite.
I immediately shook my head. "No, I cannot afford a suite." The words escaped before I could stop them. The receptionist looked confused. Luca looked amused. "You are not paying for it." My stomach tightened. "I cannot let you do that." "Why?" he asked calmly. "Because normal strangers do not give people luxury suites." For a second, genuine amusement appeared in his eyes. Perhaps I am not normal. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded honest. That was somehow more unsettling. I followed him toward the elevator while my mind raced through 100 questions. Wealth. Influence. Private hotels. Employees who recognized him instantly. The respectful voice on the phone. None of it fit together completely, yet the pieces were beginning to form a picture. The elevator doors opened silently. As we stepped inside, another man in a dark suit approached from the lobby. He stopped beside Luca briefly and handed him a folder. "Everything has been handled," the man said.
Luca nodded.
"Thank you." The man glanced toward me politely before walking away. My eyes dropped to the folder. Several documents were visible inside. One page shifted slightly, just enough for me to notice a headline.
Romano Holdings.
Beneath it was a photograph of Luca standing beside political leaders, business executives, and men whose faces I recognized from television interviews. My pulse quickened. The elevator doors closed. The storm outside faded into the distance. And for the first time since leaving the airport, I realized the stranger who had offered me a ride might be far more powerful than I had ever imagined. The elevator climbed in silence. Soft instrumental music played somewhere above us, blending with the faint hum of machinery hidden behind polished walls. I stood beside Luca Romano and stared at the glowing floor numbers, trying to make sense of everything I had seen during the past hour. The airport, the storm, the unexpected ride, the private hotel, the employees who seemed to recognize him instantly. Nothing about the evening felt ordinary anymore. The doors opened onto the top floor. A quiet hallway stretched before us, illuminated by warm golden sconces mounted against dark wood paneling. The atmosphere felt less like a hotel and more like a private residence designed for people accustomed to privacy. Luca walked calmly ahead while I followed, my carry-on rolling softly across the carpet. At the end of the corridor, he stopped outside a large suite and opened the door. The room beyond was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the rain-soaked city. A stone fireplace glowed softly in one corner. Fresh flowers sat on a table near the windows. The entire suite felt peaceful, insulated from the chaos of the storm outside. I stood frozen for a moment. "This cannot be necessary," I said quietly. Luca set my bag near the sofa. Neither was sleeping in an airport terminal. I wanted to argue. Instead, I laughed softly. He had a frustrating habit of making simple points impossible to challenge. My eyes drifted back toward the city lights beyond the glass. Lightning flashed in the distance. For a moment, the skyline appeared silver beneath the storm clouds. "You help strangers often?" I asked. Luca considered the question. "Not usually." "Then why me?" The room became still. Not uncomfortable, just honest. He slipped his hands into his pockets and looked toward the rain. "Because everyone else looked away." The answer caught me completely off guard. There was no performance in it. No attempt to impress me. Only a simple truth delivered without hesitation. I studied him carefully. The expensive suit. The confidence. The influence that seemed to follow him everywhere. Yet beneath all of that was something unexpected. Awareness. He noticed things. People. Details others ignored. My phone finally died in my hand. The black screen reflected my confused expression. Luca noticed immediately. Again. "There is a charger beside the bed." I laughed. "Do you notice everything?" A faint smile appeared. "Most things." A knock sounded at the door. Moments later, a hotel employee entered carrying a tray with coffee, tea, sandwiches, and fresh fruit. The employee greeted Luca respectfully before leaving. I stared at the spread. "You arranged this too? You have not eaten since the airport." I opened my mouth to ask how he knew that. Then I stopped. Of course he knew. He had been paying attention all night. As we sat across from each other near the fireplace, I noticed a newspaper folded beside the coffee table. A photograph was visible above the fold. My eyes narrowed. The man in the picture looked familiar. Very familiar. Slowly, I reached for the paper. The headline discussed business acquisitions and private investment groups throughout the Northeast. Beneath the article was a photograph of Luca standing beside influential executives and public officials. My heartbeat quickened. The article described him as one of the most powerful and feared businessmen in the region. Then I saw another phrase. Organized crime investigations. The words seemed to echo inside my mind. I looked up from the paper. Luca was already watching me. Calm. Composed. Almost as though he had known this moment was coming from the very beginning. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside the suite, the warmth suddenly felt different. Because for the first time that night, I realized the stranger who had rescued me from the airport was not simply wealthy or influential. He was a man whose name carried power, mystery, and a reputation that reached far beyond anything I had imagined. The next morning arrived softly, though the rain still lingered outside, tapping against the wide windows of the suite like a steady drumbeat. Rachel Bennett sat on the edge of the bed, sipping a cup of coffee, the steam curling gently upward, carrying warmth into the cool, quiet room. Across from her, Luca Romano remained near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed yet commanding, observing her with an intensity that felt both protective and unreadable. The morning light revealed subtle details she had not noticed before, the slight creases near his eyes when he smiled faintly, the precise tailoring of his suit even in casual moments, the calm deliberation in every movement he made. Rachel turned her gaze toward the city outside, where streets glistened under the aftermath of the storm, reflecting neon signs and traffic lights in puddles like liquid mirrors. "Why did you really pick me up last night?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. Luca's eyes met hers in the mirror behind the fireplace, steady and unflinching. "Because you were alone, exhausted, and overlooked. Someone had to act." His voice was calm, measured, carrying weight without demanding agreement. She felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity, the way someone might feel when they realize they are standing on the edge of something unfamiliar yet necessary. Breakfast arrived, a simple tray with pastries, fruit, and more coffee, and she was grateful but still hesitant to eat, still processing the events from the night before. Luca sat beside her eventually, leaning slightly forward, not touching, just present, a quiet anchor in the soft morning light. You look exhausted, he said, his tone neither judgmental nor condescending, merely observant. She nodded, realizing the day's fatigue matched more than just lost sleep. It matched the uncertainty and vulnerability of unexpected trust. Outside, the city hummed with life returning after the storm, a distant sound of cars and footsteps, blending with the occasional call of a street vendor. Inside the suite, the atmosphere felt timeless, insulated, a private world where decisions seemed both urgent and gentle, urgent because of the underlying power Luca carried, gentle because he imposed no immediate demands, leaving her space to think, breathe, and observe. Rachel noticed details she had not before, the small collection of books on a shelf, the way sunlight reflected on the polished surfaces, the quiet presence of security subtly stationed in the background, invisible yet unmistakable. Luca broke the silence again, offering a slight smile. You will need to decide your next move carefully, he said, voice low and deliberate. But you are not alone. She absorbed the words, letting them sink in. The storm outside had passed, yet the ripples of the night before remained, the sense of the extraordinary threading through an otherwise ordinary morning. For the first time since leaving the airport, she felt the faintest stir of hope, tempered with the understanding that the stranger who had offered her a ride, who had brought her here safely, was not merely powerful, but someone whose influence and choices could change the course of her life in ways she was only beginning to grasp. The suite felt quiet, safe, and charged. A temporary sanctuary in a world that seemed suddenly larger, more complex, and filled with unseen currents of power, authority, and unspoken intent. The suite felt suspended in time, a quiet cocoon insulated from the bustling city outside. Yet within it, the air carried a subtle tension, the unspoken awareness of decisions yet to be made. Rachel Bennett moved slowly toward the large windows, the rain-streaked glass distorting the view of the streets below, reflections of neon and headlights shimmering like fractured glass. Luca Romano remained near the fireplace, hands folded, watching her every movement with an intensity that suggested he understood far more than he revealed. You think you understand me, Rachel said softly, breaking the stillness, but you know nothing. Luca's expression did not change, but the faintest flicker of acknowledgement passed through his eyes. Perhaps, he replied, voice steady, but I know enough to ensure you are safe. The words hung between them, heavy with implication, and for a moment, Rachel felt the gravity of her situation pressed against her chest. A knock sounded at the door, subtle but precise, and moments later a hotel employee entered, carrying a small envelope with her name written neatly in elegant script. She took it, hands slightly trembling, and opened it carefully. Inside were boarding passes, a note indicating a secure vehicle waiting to take her to her next destination, and an itinerary that suggested careful planning rather than random chance. Rachel's pulse quickened as she realized that every detail of her night and morning had been anticipated, orchestrated with precision that left no room for error. You have planned this far ahead, she said, looking up at Luca. I prepare for contingencies, he answered simply. His composure was both reassuring and disquieting. He exuded power without needing to assert it, authority without demanding acknowledgement. The storm outside had softened, leaving only a gentle drizzle, yet the tension in the suite remained palpable, a reminder that the calm was temporary and fragile. Rachel walked back toward the seating area, the envelope clutched in her hands, realizing that Luca's presence was not merely protective but subtly instructive, guiding her through a world she had barely glimpsed, where decisions carried weight beyond comprehension. She set the envelope on the coffee table and sank into the armchair, her gaze fixed on him. Why me? She asked, voice low, almost a whisper. Luca tilted his head slightly, eyes meeting hers with a quiet certainty. Because you act with integrity, he said, and the statement, simple though it was, resonated in ways she could not immediately articulate. Outside, the drizzle reflected the morning light in delicate patterns, illuminating the suite with soft, shifting hues. Inside, the quiet was thick with unspoken understanding, the beginning of a connection that neither rushed nor demanded, but existed, palpable and deliberate, between the stranger who had rescued her and the young woman whose life had just been touched irrevocably by his presence. Each passing moment reinforced the reality that this encounter was no mere coincidence, but the unfolding of events carefully guided by someone accustomed to influence, discretion, and control, and Rachel felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, aware that the next decision she made would carry consequences far beyond the confines of this quiet, storm-softened suite, and that the man watching her, so composed and confident, was not simply a helper but a force whose reach extended into dimensions of power she had yet to fully understand. The sun had risen higher, casting gentle light into the suite, and yet the world outside still seemed quieter, subdued, almost reflective after the storm. Rachel Bennett moved to the window once more, watching the city slowly resume its rhythm, traffic lights blinking, umbrellas dotting the streets, and the faint echo of early morning footsteps. Luca Romano remained near the fireplace, a calm sentinel, his posture relaxed but still commanding, eyes occasionally flicking toward her with a quiet attentiveness that made her acutely aware of his presence. The envelope with the itinerary and documents still lay on the coffee table, untouched, a reminder that decisions loomed ahead, and that every choice carried weight in a world she was only beginning to understand. "I never expected any of this," Rachel admitted, her voice low, almost to herself. Luca's gaze held hers, steady and unshaken. "Expect the unexpected," he said simply, and the words seemed to echo with authority, yet carried no menace, only certainty. She realized that the night's events had not been chaotic. They had been orchestrated, deliberate, a chain of moments designed to ensure her safety, to guide her into a position where she could act, observe, and understand. Breakfast had been cleared, but the warmth of coffee lingered in the air, the subtle aroma blending with the faint scent of cedar and polished wood. Outside, the city gleamed under residual puddles, reflections of lights dancing across the surfaces. Rachel finally approached the envelope and opened it again, scanning the itinerary, noting the secure vehicle arranged to continue her journey. She looked up, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "You've thought of everything," she said. Luca's faint smile was almost imperceptible. "I prefer to know the terrain before taking a step." The calm decisiveness of his tone contrasted sharply with the uncertainty she had carried until now. He moved closer, sitting on the arm of the sofa beside her, close enough to offer comfort but distant enough to respect space. "You will make choices," he continued, "and you will do so with eyes open. That is the most important part." Rachel nodded, absorbing the weight of his guidance. Outside, the morning progressed, sunlight breaking through thinning clouds, illuminating the city in golden hues. Inside, the suite remained a private world, insulated yet charged with subtle anticipation, a place where trust had begun to form quietly and deliberately. For the first time since the journey began, Rachel felt clarity emerging, a sense that the night's fear, the uncertainty, and the mysterious intervention had all converged to create a moment of awakening. Luca's presence, calm yet commanding, suggested that the stranger who had rescued her, guided her, and protected her was not simply powerful in influence, but also deliberate in his intentions, ensuring that every action, every gesture, carried meaning and consequence. As she gazed at him, sunlight catching in his eyes, she understood that her life had shifted irreversibly. The experience had not just been a rescue, but the beginning of an entirely new understanding of trust, power, and the subtle bonds that could form in the quietest, most deliberate moments. Outside, the city moved forward, but inside the suite, time seemed to pause, allowing Rachel to absorb, reflect, and prepare for what was to come, aware that the man beside her was both guide and enigma, and that the events of this morning would resonate far beyond the walls of the suite, shaping choices, decisions, and possibilities in ways she had not yet begun to imagine.